Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be watching this. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, I want to talk more about the definition essay, writing an extended definition, and I'm going to use comics as an example. Um, Most of the artwork here was taken from a book called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, and we're just going to talk about how he goes about defining comics and what he does that you can think about doing as you're writing your essay. So let's start with the idea that we're going to start basic and we're going to build. And we're going to start with a dictionary definition, or in this case, an expert's definition. Will Eisner was an expert in comics, and Eisner is one of the people who his name is attached to some of the awards that are given out every year for comics writers and comic book companies and whatever all else. And so he starts with a very, very basic definition: sequential art. And as you can see in the comic, he wants to expand that definition. But sequential art has some problems, and we need to be more specific. For example, sequential art could probably include music. And comic books are a lot of things, but they are not music. As you expand, I think it's important that you consider the implication. Sequential visual art certainly eliminates music from the definition. We've solved the problem that I talked about just a second ago. However, we may have added a problem because animation is visual art in sequence, but it doesn't fit the definition of comics. They're static, they're not animated. So consider the implication as you take away one problem, are you creating another? Next, work to avoid being snobby. Juxtapose. Juxtapose is a fancy word to say you are placing two or more things side by side, often to illustrate a contrast. Also, the term art certainly has this idea of being snobby. We're going to an art gallery. So the definition shouldn't sound snobby, but if I change it to juxtapose sequential static images, I'm getting pretty arbitrary, and being arbitrary defeats the purpose of having a definition that can be used in multiple situations. So, once again, don't create new problems by fixing an existing problem. And don't create confusion. Juxtapose static images in deliberate sequence. Letters are static images. If they are arranged in a deliberate sequence, we call them words. Comic books don't need words. Comics can just be the pictures, and they can be in a deliberate sequence. But now, juxtapose static images in deliberate sequence allows us to have words mean the same thing as comics. And words should not mean the same thing as comics because you're creating confusion, the very thing you're seeking to avoid with the definition. Also, know what to add and know what to cut. Juxtaposed pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence, we can probably keep that. However, a lot of people will argue that comics have to have superheroes in them, whether it's Batman or the X-Men or anything else. They don't. There are hundreds of comics without any superheroes at all. There are hundreds of comics without people at all. There are hundreds of comics that deal with all sorts of subjects that don't have people in capes and spandex. And so, what you need to do is what can you add? What can you cut? As you add, you probably need to remember that this essay is an extended definition, 2 to 5 pages, and extended definitions rarely come up in casual conversation. However, is there a sense of purpose that we need to have here? So, juxtapose pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence. Why do they exist? They convey information, they produce an aesthetic response in the viewer. They do something to make the viewer think about beauty, to make the viewer think about, is this good? Is this bad? Is this a good story? Is the art pleasing? Does the art fit what I consider art to be? And it doesn't have to be anything to do with superheroes. But at least it gives me now the sense of purpose, and it gives me a definition. There's probably still a few too many big words here. Do I have to go around defining juxtaposed? Those sorts of things, but at least it's a start. And make sure that your complete definition eliminates items that seem similar but really aren't. A good definition is going to close off as many things as it opens up. For example, in comics, a cartoon, a single panel cartoon, is not a comic because you can't have a sequence of one. If I'm looking at the definition, images, plural, in deliberate sequence. A cartoon is a single image, and it doesn't have a sequence. You can't have a sequence of one. So think about, does this definition close off things and make, by closing off options, make it easier for your reader to follow along, to go with the flow here? I think that's going to wrap it up for this one. I hope this was helpful. I hope everyone has a good day, and I hope to see you in class the next class period.